So the first topic that we are covering is the advent of Europeans. So which means that when the Europeans came into India and they came as a trader and they start flourishing as an administrator. So we will go to that thing, but before, let us see that when and how the particular Europeans came. So here you can see in this list there is the name of the companies or the countries that came from Europe and which in which particular year they came. So starting from the first one, the Portuguese. Portuguese came in 1498 AD. Then comes the English. English came in 1600 AD. But I would like to add point here. Basically, Britishers start their journey in 31st of December 1600 when they got the royal charter from the Queen Elizabeth first at that time. And after that, they started their journey and they particularly reached India in 1608 when the first merchant of the East India Company, that was William Hawkins, came into the court of Jahangir, that was in 1608. Let's move further. We will discuss it and explain it in form later on. Then comes the Dutch. Dutch started their system in 1602. And after that comes the Danish. Danish basically came in 1616 AD. Danish is none other than Denmark. And after that came the French. French came in 1664. Colbert was the person who started the company called French East India Company, and they came in 1664. And Swedish basically came in 1731, but they did not flourish themselves a lot in this particular country. And a lot we need to learn is about Portuguese, British, and French. So let's start with them. So first one is Portuguese. So let's read about them. So the first one is Vasco da Gama. I hope you must have heard this name Vasco da Gama a lot in your life since childhood. He is also famously known as the person who discovered India. So let's read about him. Vasco da Gama arrived at Calicut, modern Kozhikode, in 1498. Kozhikode is also famously known as the literature city of our country, as this recognition is given by UNESCO, where he was cordially received by King Zamorin, the ruler of Calicut. King Zamorin was a title basically of the king, and he was the king of Calicut. Calicut, as we have already discussed, is Kozhikode, that is on the Malabar side of our country or the Malabar coast. Today, you will find this place in Kerala. After that, an Indian fisherman, Abdul Majid, helped him to reach Indian coast. So basically, he was stuck in Kenya, and there he met this person, the fisherman called Abdul Majid. He helped this particular person called the Vasco da Gama, and Vasco da Gama basically came along with him and towards India. And when they particularly reached, so this was the first time when Vasco da Gama arrived in India. So do remember that India was already known to the world, but he was the one who discovered the sea route, passing through the Cape of Good Hope, that is the southernmost point of African continent, and passing through the what would I say, the channel, that is the Mozambique channel. Then he reached Kenya, and after that, Abdul Majid took him to Calicut. By 1502, Vasco's second visit led to the establishment of trading stations at Calicut, Cochin, and Kannanur, and fortification of the same. So basically, during his first visit, he made a profit that is 60 times of what the expenditure he made while he was visiting our country. So that is why a lot of hype was created in Europe, that a lot of people from different countries are also enthusiastic to visit our country. And Vasco da Gama once again came in 1502. There were total 3 visits done by Vasco da Gama. Remember that. Now we need to learn about Pedro Alvarez Cabral. So he established the first factory at Calicut in 1500. Basically, let us talk about this also. So when Vasco da Gama came, so after him, as I was saying, a lot of different people came, and one more Portuguese came, that was Pedro Alvarez Cabral. And he was the one who established the first factory of Portuguese in our country at Calicut, that was in 1500. Though this factory was not able to flourish because when this factory was established by Portuguese, the lot of people came in the court of Zamorin and they asked Zamorin that this is illegal and they are particularly going to corrupt the system. So Zamorin basically attacked them on this factory, and in particularly reflection, Vasco da Gama and other merchants also attacked on Zamorin. So when this happened, this factory was destroyed, but later, due to the war that was waged between Zamorin and Vasco da Gama and the others, Vasco da Gama was able to take the control of this place, Calicut, and now was able to flourish their system in this particular place. Then comes the first Portuguese governor. Remember the name Francisco de Almeida. So, if we talk about Francisco de Almeida, always remember that he was the first Portuguese governor, and he took this post in 1505 and remained to this post till 1509. The first governor, as I was saying, appointed by king to protect Portuguese interest, initiated the blue water policy or Cartaz system. So if we talk first of all about the blue water policy, so remember one thing, that Portuguese was the place where the first navigation school was established in the 15th century, in the early starting of 15th century. And that is why there is also a phenomena occurs in the mind of Portuguese, that they were particularly called themselves the rulers of the oceans. And because of that, when they took the control of the Malabar area, they also started the blue water policy, which means that any kind of ship that is passing through this area for trade purpose, they have to give a particular token, or you would say a particular toll, to the Portuguese army or navy. So that was basically the blue water policy or the Cartaz system started by Francisco de Almeida. Cartaz system, it was naval trade license issued by authority without which trade was prohibited, as I was saying. So I think this point is clear that how Portuguese established themselves. Let's read more about them. Albuquerque. Remember, this is the pronunciation Albuquerque. Albuquerque was another Portuguese governor. He took this post in 1509 and remained till 1515. He secured strategic control of Indian Ocean, captured Goa from Bijapur rulers, captured Bhatkal from Sri Krishna Dev Rai 1510 of the Vijayanagar, banned the practice of Sathee in his area of influence. He was considered to be the founder of the Portuguese power in India. Do you remember his name? Albuquerque. Albuquerque was a very famous name in terms of the Portuguese governor. As we can see, he was the one who captured Goa from the Bijapur Sultanate or rulers, captured Bhatkal from Sri Krishna Dev Rai of the Vijayanagar. Vijayanagar Empire was a very famous empire that flourished in the southern part of India, started in 1336 by Harihar and Bukka. And also, Albuquerque was famous for banning the practice of sati in his area of influence. So basically, the area which was under his control, he also was the one who particularly banned the sati practice. So do remember all about him. So you can see one more thing here, that as you can see that Albuquerque was also intervening into different type of system. They are here only, the year have been passed are 10 years only, and they are starting capturing the areas. They are particularly intervening into the social and religious customs. So that is one of the reason that you will not see Portuguese to flourish in our country later on. Significance of the Portuguese: introduced printing press. Very important thing, remember that. Portuguese are famous for introducing the printing press in our country, and they were also particularly introduced into the system so that the particular missionaries that they are flourishing in our country could get Christian missionaries that are flourishing in our country could get a particular pamphlet, and that would be printed. So do remember that first printing press was came along with Portuguese. Introduced cannon on ship. So cannons were the first time that was embarked on the ships, and this thing was introduced by Portuguese. Introduced the cultivation of tobacco to India. Very important. Do remember one more thing, that Jahangir was the king who banned tobacco later on. Introduced the art of the goldsmith, flourished at Goa. Even today, if you go to Goa, you will find this particular system is still very important and very famous in Goa. The famous Jesuit Saint Francisco Xavier arrived in India with Martin Alfonso de Souza, the first pastor to visit India with the purpose of flourishing Christian missionaries. Introduce nut, potato, tomato, chilies, capsicum. Do you remember all these things? Potato, very important. They took potato from Peru and introduced it in India. In 1612, Battle of Swally, also known as the Battle of Suwali, was fought between English and Portuguese, in which Portuguese were confined to Damandiv and Goa. This was a very famous and very important battle, guys. Actually, what happened was that Britishers also came in 1608 into the court of Jahangir. But Jahangir, firstly, Jahangir particularly banned the Britishers for doing any kind of business. But when they insist Jahangir, so Jahangir basically indirectly said that if you can face Portuguese and you can perish them, then we will be having some deal. So Battle of Swally happened in 1612. Portuguese lost, and Britishers created a remarkable thing and their particular name in front of Jahangir, and then Britishers became a very important trader and navy operator for Mughals in our country. So I think all these points are clear. Now let's talk about Dutch. In 1602, the United East India Company of Netherlands was formed, and it received the sanction of their government to trade in East England, including India. They established first factory at Masulipatam, Andhra Pradesh in 1605. So Dutch basically are the people belongs to Netherlands. Do remember that, and they received the sanctions from their government to trade in East, including India. That is why all these companies generally are called East India Company, because they had their particular sanction to do trade in the eastern side of this world. Because Europeans basically they divided the world into two halves, Western and Eastern, and all the companies that are having their name East India Company, so they were particularly given the responsibility to trade in this part. They established first factory at Masulipatam, Andhra Pradesh in 1605. Cornelis de Houtman was the first Dutchman to reach Sumatra and Bantam in 1596. I hope you know Sumatra is the island that particularly exists in the Indonesian archipelago. And Sumatra, you can see, is the place where you can also find a Malacca Strait. So the first Dutchman, Cornelis de Houtman, was the first to reach Sumatra. Dutch factories in India: Masulipatam 1605, Pulicat 1610, Surat 1616, Bimli Patnam 1641, Karikal 1645, Chinsura 1653, Kasim Bazar in particularly established by the Dutch factories. Kasim Bazar basically is also you can find in Bengal side. Chinsura is also in Bengal side. Later, Chinsura, Battle of Chinsura is also very famous. That was fought in 1759. Barana, Gor, Patna, Balsor, Naga, Patnam, 1658, and Cochin, 1663. It covered both and western coasts. So I hope this point is very clear about the Dutch. And Dutch arrived in 1602. One point, do remember one more point. Dutch East India Company was the first one to introduce the IPO in our country, because they started taking money from the public to establish their trade in our country. Let's read more about them. Significance of the Dutch. Battle of Bedara, 1759. It is also famously known as Battle of Chinsura, which I was saying earlier. So this battle was the place in which Dutch perished in our country, because the English defeated the Dutch. Dutch were ousted from India, as I was saying. And this was the time after the Battle of Plassey when this battle was fought. And this was fought because the Mir Zafar, the Nawab of Bengal that was appointed by the Britishers, betrayed Britishers and called Dutch for help. So this battle was fought. We will talk about it later on also. The British agreed to withdraw all their claims on Indonesia, and the Dutch retired from India. Also, one more thing, remember, that they were also the one who removed their any kind of claim on Andaman and Nicobar and sold them to Britishers. So do remember the Battle of Bedara or Battle of Chinsura or Battle of Hugli. There are three names for this battle, 1759. Then comes the very important British, or we can say English. In 1600, I would say 31st of December 1600, Elizabeth, the Queen of England, granted a charter to the Governor and Company of Merchants of London to trade with East Indies. And basically, there were two people, John Watt and George White. And those were the two who started this particular trading firm. And they took the royal charter from Queen Elizabeth to do trade in the eastern side of world, and that is East Indies. William Hawkins arrived at Jahangir's court in 1608 but failed to secure permission due to opposition by Portuguese. So basically, he came in 1608, and when he asked for the permission to do trade, Jahangir did not give the permission. Did not give the permission. Why? Because Jahangir was also trading with the help of Portuguese, and it would be a kind of a counter thing for Portuguese. So Jahangir was not in the state of taking any kind of battle with them. So that is why he did not give the permission. In 1611, Captain Middleton, very important, remember this name, obtained the permission of the Mughal governor of Surat to trade there, also started trade in Masulipatam, and that is why in 1612, the Battle of Swali, which we earlier read about, fought between Britishers and Portuguese. Now I think you are connecting the dot. In 1613, a factory of East India Company was established at Surat. In 1615, Sir Thomas Raw, the ambassador of King James I, arrived at Jahangir's court with lot of presents that were presented to Jahangir. And then Jahangir also gave permission to do trade in different parts of the country. So this was the time when Thomas Raw was granted a lot of permissions. Do remember, Surat was the first legal factory of Britishers in our country that was established in 1630. In 1616, the company established its first factory in the south in Masuli, Patnam. So this is the first factory in south in Masuli, Patnam. In 1632, the company got the Golden Farman from the Sultan of Golconda, which ensured safety and prosperity of their trade. Because Britishers were very clever in getting these type of farmans or these type of deals from the kings, and after that they particularly established themselves one by one in each and every part of our country. In 1633, the company established its first factory in East India in Hariharpur, Balsor, Odisha. So I hope this point is very clear to all of you that how they came and how they established different factories. Let's read more about them. So let's read further. Fort St. George is the first English fortress in India, founded in 1644 at the coastal city of Madras, modern day Chennai. Do remember this point, guys. This is very important. Remember, the first legal factory was established in Surat, and the first fort was established was Fort St. George. Most of the people got confused with the Fort Williams. No, Fort Williams not the first. Fort St. George was the first, and it was established by the English in Chennai in 1644. In 1667, Aurangzeb gave the English a farman for trade in Bengal. And this, as I was saying also, that these kind of farmans helped a lot the Britishers in particularly doing trade. And this one they got from the king of Mughal Empire, that was Aurangzeb. So particularly it was very helpful for them to do a kind of a trade and create a lot of profit in Bengal. In 1717, this year is also very important, guys. The Mughal Emperor Farrukh Shiar issued a farman called Magna Carta of the company, giving the company a large number of trade concessions in Bengal, Gujarat, and Hyderabad. It included. So this was basically the time when in 1717 Farrukh Shah gave this farman or called the Magna Carta. I would like to add one point here. Farrukh Shah was suffering through a particular disease in which a particular physician from the British Empire, he came into the court of Farrukh Shah and he helped Farrukh Shah from getting the things right. And as soon as the medicine was given to Farrukhsiyar was so overwhelmed that he provided this particular farman to the company, and because of which a lot of concessions were given, and because of which Britishers were able to create a lot of wealth, which later they also used in fighting the kings of our own country. Companies import and export were exempted from duties. As I was saying, first thing, permission to issue dastaks for transportation of goods. Basically, dastak is a kind of a card, you can say, that is given at that time. And with the help of this dastak, with the annual payment in the places like Bengal and Gujarat, that is very very low payment given by Britishers to the king. They can just move their trade or their goods from one place to another in Bengal and Gujarat. So dastak was also very important thing given by Farrukhsiyar. Duty free trade in Hyderabad. It was also done. Company minted coins to act as currency throughout Mughal Empire. So do remember this is also done. Now we need to know about Danes, that is Danish. Danish East India Company was established in 1660 AD, 1616 AD, and let's read more about them. Danish East India Company established settlement at Kubar, that is Tamil Nadu, that is in Tamil Nadu in 1620, and Sirampur in Bengal in 1676. Significance of the Danes: they were the foremost promoters of Christianity in India. So do remember that so far we have learned about Portuguese, then we know about Dutch, English, and now Danish East India Company, that is Danes. Now let's read more. Now we need to know about French. So in 1664, Colbert, a minister of Louis XIV, do remember Louis XIV was the king of France? No, do not get confused with Louis XVI. In French Revolution, the king that was killed was Louis XVI. And now come back to the point. So a minister of Louis XIV laid the foundation of French East India Company. It was granted 50-year monopoly on French trade in the Indian and Pacific Oceans. The French factory was established at Surat by Francois Caron in 1668 and second at Masulipatam in 1669. So do remember that they also established the factory in Surat in 1668. Earlier, Britishers established their factory in 1613. Remember these years. These years are really important, guys. And second at Masulipatam in 1669. In 1730, Dupleix became the governor of Chandernagore, and in 1741 he became the governor of French territory in India. Dupleix was a very famous name in the terms of French East India Company if we talk about. Dupleix was also the one who gave the idea of subsidiary alliance in our country. In 1673 AD, the French obtained a village called Pondicherry from Sher Khan Lodi, the ruler of Bijapur, and founded a thriving city on it, which later became the main stronghold of the French in India. So do remember, this is also very important. And later in life, later in the history, we will see that Pondicherry will be the core area where France, or we can say French, flourished. Let's read about Carnatic Wars. Carnatic Wars are really important, guys. So Carnatic was the name given to the Coromandel coast and its hinterland by the Europeans. So do not get confused it with Karnataka. Carnatic is the particular place that in today's world we can say Coromandel coast, like Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, these areas are included. Post Carnatic War 1740 to 1748. The First Carnatic War is remembered for the Battle of St. Thom in Madras, fought between the French forces and the forces of Anwaruddin, the Nawab of Carnatic, supported by British forces. So basically, the Carnatic War was started because there was a kind of a dispute going on in Austria regarding the succession of throne. And do remember one thing, whenever any kind of dispute at that time was rising in Europe, France and Britain will always be found on opposite sides. So they also started fighting in India. And the First Carnatic War is famous for Battle of St. Thom, fought between the French forces and Anwaruddin, the Nawab of Carnatic. Remember who was the Carnatic Nawab? That was Anwar Uddin. English seized French ships, French seized Madras. The war was ended with the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle, 1748. Under this treaty, France agreed to leave the Austrian Netherlands and give back Madras to Britain in return of Louisbourg. So, if we talk about this treaty, basically, as I was saying, that there was a dispute in the point of succession in Austria. And this treaty, that is why this treaty is named Aix-la-Chapelle, because it was signed in Europe, not in India. And as soon as this treaty was signed, as soon as the dispute of succession of Austria was solved, the war in Carnatic was also resolved. And the territories that were captured by France and Britain of each other were also given back. Second Carnatic War started in 1749 and remained in 1754. The French authorities, annoyed at the heavy financial losses that Dupleix policy involved, decided to recall him in 1754. Charles Robert Goudou succeeded Dupleix as the French Governor General in India. Treaty of Pondicherry, very important. This was the end point where the Second Carnatic War was done. Do remember that there were two sides fighting. One was backed by Robert Clive and one was backed by Dupleix during the Second Carnatic War. And after the Second Carnatic War, Dupleix was called back and was given punishment in France. And Charles Robert Goudou succeeded Dupleix. Goudou adopted a policy of negotiation with the English and signed the Treaty of Pondicherry with them, under which the English and the French agreed not to interfere in the quarrels of native princes. So, do remember these two Carnatic wars? Then now we have to read further. Third Carnatic War. Background of the war was the 7 Years' War in Europe, that is from 1756 to 1763. The Battle of Wandiwash in 1760 was the final blow to the French. General Aircourt of the English totally routed the French army under Comte de Lally. This was the time when Britishers came to know that they can particularly engage anyone in this war, because earlier 1756 Battle of Plassey was also won by them. And 1759 the Battle of Bedara was also won by British, and Britishers were emerging as a big company in our country. The Third War ended with the Treaty of Peace of Paris 1763, under which Pondicherry and Chandarnagar were returned to France, but they could only have trading activities in them. Items of import: Persian Gulf regions, pearl, raw silk, wool, dates, dried fruits, and rose water. So basically, if we talk about the Persian Gulf, so Persian Gulf was basically we are learning that what type of things were imported at that time. So from Persian Gulf, all these things were imported. Arabia, coffee, gold, drugs, and honey. China, tea, sugar, porcelain, and silk. Tibet, gold, musk, and woolen cloth. Africa, ivory, and drugs. Ivory are basically the, if you can say the, if you have seen the teeth of elephants and all those things, so that is called ivory. Woolen cloth, copper, iron, lead, and paper from Europe. So that was Third Carnatic War, and these things were imported. Items of export: cotton textile, raw silk and silk fabrics, hardware, indigo, saltpeter. Saltpeter is basically used for making bullets, or you can say for guns also. Opium, rice, wheat, sugar, pepper, and other spices, precious stones, and drugs. So all these things were exported. India on the eve of British conquest. Now we have to learn that how British conquered India completely. So first half of the 18th century saw the decline of Mughals. The reign of Aurangzeb 1658 to 1707 was the beginning of the end of Mughal era in India. Basically, Aurangzeb got himself entered into a lot of disputes, and that is why it became the reason that Mughals later declined. The misguided policies of Aurangzeb weakened the stability of the state, and the decline gained momentum after his death due to wars of succession and weak rulers. So, as I was saying, basically, Aurangzeb got himself into a lot of disputes, as he was in dispute with Maratha, with Ahom, with Sikh Empire, with Jats, and all of that. And because of which, the later empire got weakened. Rise of regional states, successor states. So basically, after the falling of Mughal Empire, lot of different type of empires were formed. They broke away from the empire but did not challenge the sovereignty of the Mughals. Examples: Bengal, Awadh, and Hyderabad. In Bengal and Awadh, Nawabs were created, and in Hyderabad, Nizam was created. Independent kingdoms. These were established due to destabilization of Mughal controls over the provinces. These are the ones who are apart, who are away from the sovereignty of Mughals. Examples: Mysore, Kerala, Rajput. New states. These were set by rebels against the Mughals. Examples: Maratha, Sikhs, and Jats. So these are the new type of systems that were creating after the death of Aurangzeb, or even during the time when Aurangzeb was there, because a lot of people were rebelling against him, like Maratha and Sikhs and Jats and all these type of kingdoms. Bengal, Awadh, and Hyderabad created after the death of Aurangzeb. And here you can see Hyderabad, Nizam ul Mulk, Chin Kilich Khan, Awadh Sadat Ali Khan, Buran ul Mulk. Bengal, Murshid Quli Khan was the Nawab, first Nawab. Mysore, initially ruled by the Wodeyars, later Hyder Ali usurped the power. Kerala, Martand Verma. Jats, Churaman and Badan Singh. Sikhs, Guru Gobind Singh. Now, we need to know about the expansion and strengthening of the British Empire. Timeline of the event. So let's see that how and where they have expanded. 1740, Anglo-French struggle began for supremacy in India with the First Carnatic War. We just read about it. 1757, 23rd June 1757, the Battle of Plassey, very important. This was the day called Sunday. At that day, the day was Sunday. British forces defeated the Nawab of Bengal at Plassey, and that was Siraj-ud-Daulah. The British East India Company, commanded by Robert Clive, against Siraj-ud-Daulah, the Nawab of Bengal, Bihar, and Odisha, supported by French force. It was a decisive victory for the British. Mir Zafar Khan entered Murshidabad with Clive and became Nawab of Bengal, Bihar, and Odisha. Mir Zafar Khan was compelled to pay substantial sums of money to the East India Company. So these are the things which are helping the Britishers to establish themselves in our country. Further, let's see. 1761, very important. The Third Battle of Panipat, fought between the Maratha Empire and coalition of the King of Afghanistan, Ahmad Shah Durrani, Rohilla Afghans of the Doab, and Shuja-ud-Daulah, the Nawab of Awadh. Marathas lost the battle and their prestige. English benefited from this war. So this battle was the one where Marathas also got weakened, and also became one of the reasons that Britishers now know that Marathas are not very much weak, but kind of weak, and now they can also struggle them against Marathas also. That is why the first Anglo-Maratha was also fought in the later 1760s. Battle of Buxar 1764. This was the battle which created a particular mark of the British Empire establishment in Bengal majorly. And after this Battle of Buxar, the Treaty of Allahabad was signed, and because of which Britishers got the Diwani of Bengal. So fought between British East India Company and Mir Qasim, the Nawab of Bengal, Shuja-ud-Daulah, the Nawab of Awadh, and Shah Alam II, the Mughal Emperor. British defeated the combined forces of Mir Qasim, Shuja-ud-Daulah, and Shah Alam II. Treaty of Allahabad, as I was saying, 1765. Battle of Buxar led to the signing of the Treaty of Allahabad. It was signed by Lord Robert Clive with Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II. Anglo-Mysore Wars, First Anglo-Mysore War, 1767-1769. So here you can see these battles were fought. Then comes the Anglo-Mysore Wars, very important. So first Anglo-Mysore War was fought between 1767 to 1769. Cause in 1766, the East India Company joined the Nizam, ruler of Hyderabad, against Hyder Ali in return for the cession of the northern Sirkar. So basically, there were disputes between the kings of India. Like Mysore was in dispute with Hyderabad, and Britishers came to know about them, and they used these disputes for their own benefits. So they backed Nizam, and they struggled against Mysore. Participants, Britishers, along with the Marathas and the Nizam of Hyderabad, declared war on Mysore. Result, Hyder Ali was able to bring the Marathas and the Nizam to his side. The Treaty of Madras was signed in 1769, which brought an end to the war. Second Anglo-Mysore War, 1780 to 1784. Cause, the Marathas attacked Mysore in 1771, but the British refused to honor the Treaty of Madras and did not give support to Hyder Ali. Participants, Hyder Ali forged an alliance with the Nizam and Marathas and defeated the British forces in Arcot. Result, Treaty of Mangalore, 1784. Both parties agreed to return the captured territories and prisoners to each other. Also remember, Hyder Ali died during this battle, was going, and Tipu Sultan became the king of Mysore. So do remember all these things. Now, once again, Anglo-Mysore Wars. Third Anglo-Mysore War, 1790 to 1792. Cause, Tipu Sultan, after Hyder Ali's death, had French help in bettering his military resources. Tipu declared war on Travancore in 1789. Travancore was a friendly state of the British. So again, Hyder Ali started the struggle against the Britishers after he took the post of being the Sultan of Mysore and attacked Travancore. Participants, Tipu Sultan and East India Company, led by Lord Cornwallis. Do remember, Lord Cornwallis was the one who fought Second Anglo-Mysore War. The war ended with the Treaty of Srirangpatnam in 1792, accounting to which Tipu had to cede half of his kingdom to the English, including the areas of Malabar, Dindigul, Coorg, and Bara Mahal. Fourth Anglo-Mysore War, 1799. Tipu refused to accept the subsidiary alliance of Lord Wellesley. He aligned with the French, which British saw as a threat to them. Marathas, Nizams, and English versus Tipu Sultan. So this was the decisive battle, and Tipu Sultan lost his life during this particular battle. The British secured a decisive victory at the Battle of Srirangpatnam, in 1799. Tipu's territories were divided between the British and the Nizam of Hyderabad. The core area surrounding Seringapatam and Mysore was restored to the Wodeyar dynasty, who had been ruling Mysore before Hyder Ali became the de facto ruler. So I hope Anglo-Mysore wars are quite clear to you, and the years are really important. Do remember all of them. Let's read more about expansion. Now comes the Anglo-Maratha Wars. So first Anglo-Maratha Wars, 1775 and 1782. So the cause of the death of Madhav Rao resulted in fighting among the Marathas. English used this for their advantage. Nana Fadnavis went against a treaty signed with the Calcutta Council and granted a port on the west coast of the French in 1777. So this was the time when the Marathas were also going out of dispute, and Madhav Rao was basically died. And after that, Ragabo, remember this name, or you can say Raghunath Rao, was the one who basically wanted to become the Peshwa. And he asked the help from the Britishers, and Britishers gave the help. But this was the time when Britishers intervened into the internal system of Marathas, but that resulted into a battle. That was First Anglo-Maratha War. Another cause was increased importance of cotton trade. Participants, Marathas and East India Company. Result, a famous battle of Vadgaon was fought in which the Marathas under Mahaji Scindia secured a decisive victory over the English. English were forced to sign the humiliating Treaty of Vadgaon in 1779. Warren Hastings rejected this treaty. Later, the war concludes by a Treaty of Salbai. Scindia was the guarantee of the treaty. Treaty of Salbai was signed on 17 May 1782 by representatives of the Maratha Empire and the British East India Company after long negotiations to settle the outcome of the First Anglo-Maratha War. It was signed between Warren Hastings and Mahatma Scindia. This is very important battle, guys. Let's read more about it. Second Anglo-Maratha War, 1803 to 1805, caused internal squabbles among Maratha houses, that were the 5 confederations of Marathas like Holkar, Gaikwads, Scindia, and Peshwa. So they were particularly quarreling between themselves, and that was the reason of this particular war. In the Battle of Poona in 1802, Yashwant Rao Holkar, the chief of the Holkars of Indore, defeated the Peshwas and Scindias. Baji Rao II sought British help and signed the Treaty of Basai, that is subsidiary alliance. Subsidiary alliance was introduced by Lord Wellesley. The Treaty of Basai was a pact between the English East India Company and Baji Rao II, the Maratha Confederacy's Peshwa. It was signed on 31st December 1802 after the Battle of Poona. The Scindias and the Bhosles did not accept this treaty, and this caused the Second Anglo-Maratha War in central India in 1803. Participants: Scindias, Bhosles, Holkars versus the British. British defeated all the Maratha forces. As a result, large parts of central India came under British control. And this was the time when Britishers were able to control the major part of our country just below the Satluj River. And that is why a treaty was also signed between Sikh Empire and Britishers. That is basically known as the treaty in which the Satluj was created as the boundary between both the empires. Another Anglo-Maratha War. Third Anglo-Maratha War, 1817 to 1818. Cause: British conflict with the Pindaris, whom the British suspected were being protected by the Marathas. Participants: the Marathas chief Peshwa Baji Rao II, Malhar Rao Holkar, and Mudoji II Bhosle united front against the English. Result was decisive and Britishers won. Battle of Koregaon was fought during this war. In this, an army of Meher, depressed class, led by an English officer, defeated the army of Peshwa. This was the last major war fought and won by British. With this, the British controlled most parts India directly or indirectly. So these are the Anglo-Maratha wars. Do remember, the total number of Maratha wars were 3. Anglo-Sikh wars. First Anglo-Sikh War, 1845 to 1846. Cause: immediately after the death of Ranjit Singh, British East India Company had begun increasing its military strength to protect the empire from any Russian invasion from northwest. Growing influence of Sikh army in the court worried the British. Due to the British provocation, Sikh forces crossed the Satluj and took offensive position against the English forces. So basically, after the death of Raja Ranjit Singh, Britishers and Sikhs were both insecure and they fight against themselves against each other during the First Anglo-Sikh War. Participants: Sikh army versus British forces. British victory at Sobrown led to the signing of the Lahore Treaty in 1846, which ended the war. Second Anglo-Sikh War, 1848-1849. Cause: murder of few East India civil service officers led to hostility. Dalhousie and his policy of extension. Participants: Sikhs versus English. Result: final battle was fought at Gujarat near Chenab in 1849, in which Britishers forces won. So this was another decisive battle, and after that, Britishers took control of Sikh Empire as well. The famous Kohinoor diamond went into British hands. Now, another important policies of Britishers. Policy of ring fence, very important. Warren Hastings, 1770s to 1800s. It can be called a predecessor of subsidiary alliance. To protect major provinces, set up subsidiary forces in the surrounding regions. Example, stationing army at Awadh, giving some weird, illogical reason. The main agenda was to protect Bengal from any external threat. Policy of subsidiary alliance. It is a treaty between the British East India Company and the Indian princely states, under which the Indian princely states lost their sovereignty to the English. It was framed by Lord Wellesley, the Governor General of India, from 1798 to 1805. It was actually used for the first time by the French Governor General Marcus Dupleix. So do remember, subsidiary alliance is a very important tool that was used by Britishers to control the area of India and the particular kings. Another policies. Feature of subsidiary alliance. Indian rulers entering into subsidiary alliance with the British had to dissolve his own armed forces and accept British forces in his territory. He had to pay for the British Army's maintenance. If he failed so, a portion of his territory would be taken away and ceded to the British. British promised non-interference in internal affairs of the Indian state. Indian state could not enter into any alliance with any other foreign power. He could also not employ any other foreign nationals other than Englishmen in his service. The Indian state could also not enter into any political connection with another Indian state without the approval of British. A British resident was stationed in the court of Indian rulers. So basically, Lord Wellesley was the one who started this subsidiary alliance. The idea was given by Dupleix, the French governor, who lost during the Second Carnatic War. And as you can see, there are a lot of things that were put on the kings of India. And whoever particularly adopted the subsidiary alliance became a kind of a puppet of Britishers at that time. And if we talk about this, so do remember the Nizam of Hyderabad and the Awadh of the Nawab of Awadh and some other people also particularly adopted the subsidiary alliance. Doctrine of lapse. It was an annexation policy followed by Lord Dalhousie when he was India's Governor General from 1848 to 1856. Features of policy. Any princely state under the direct or indirect control of the East India Company who did not have a legal male heir would be annexed by the company. Any adopted son of the Indian ruler could not be proclaimed as heir of the kingdom. The adopted son would only inherit his foster father's personal property and estates. The adopted son would also not be entitled to any pension that his father had been receiving or to any of his father's titles. In 1824, before the time of Dalhousie, the princely state of Kittur was acquired by the East India Company during using this doctrine. But officially, Satara was the first kingdom acquired under this treaty. And that's it in this session, guys. I hope you learned a lot of things with me regarding the policies, regarding the expansion, regarding the strengthening of British Empire. I will meet you in the next session in which we will discuss some more things related to the modern history. Till the time we meet, bye-bye. Take care, everyone, and see you soon.